Yo, what's up, guys? I managed to eat a little bit more, feel a little better. I managed to drink water. So that is quite cool. Because the past week I was skipping eating and water, basically. While still working out and yeah. So we watched the video by Healthy Gamer GG about how to not be that clingy. I'm gonna upload it to YouTube for sure. And it's inspired me to make a compilation of all these topics I deem necessary and interesting to take apart. And this channel seems to have a lot of them. I've watched a bunch back then, 4 years ago, 5 years ago or so, during COVID. And I'm glad I found it once again. This time dealing with a different issue, but nevertheless, I think we are in good hands. Not only because I'm watching this channel, but I actually signed up for betterhelp.com. It is expensive as fuck. Not gonna lie. I pay $60 a week. I don't know where to get that money. But I'll give it 1 or 2 weeks and see how it fares. Gonna have to work overtime to be able to afford. And if you have been following, you know I'm gonna get laser treatment in 1 week, actually next week. I'm gonna try and laser all of this. So I had to pay this as well all at once, and the lasering is expensive as shit. So now I'm pretty strapped for cash. I have to attack the savings, but it's worth it. Hope you. So yeah, let's see where we go with this. I think we're gonna watch this video how to actually handle rejection. But I feel like I wanna increase the speed to at least 1.5 because it's so long. It's been a very long time since I watched a video on 1x speed, honestly. If I watch something private, it's like 2x minimum. Watching stuff in general is just very hard for me right now. Just like trying to focus on something is hard for me. Alright, let's watch this video by Healthy Gamer GG, how to actually handle rejection.
And people are always trying to get rid of it. If I am afraid I'm ugly, if I'm afraid that I'm overweight, what am I going to be sensitive to? And the standard answer is get rejected over and over and over again. And that's, by standard answer, we're not saying it's wrong. There's a certain truth to it, right? But that's not easy to engage in, and it's not sometimes helpful. Whereas if we think about it, each of those rejections is
the
associated
speed
with
is
a lot
great.
of pain, right? It hurts. Like, you can't just ask someone to go outside and go swimming in lava every day for like a week. Like, they're not going to do that, right? It's really hard. So how can we understand this a little bit better, and how can we sort of potentially get some control over it? I have a tough time handling rejection. Hey everyone. I could really use some advice about how to get rid of this rejection sensitivity I'm having. The most small sign of rejection makes me feel absolutely miserable. I get insecure and feel hurt at first, and then angry at the person that I feel rejected by. There were many times where it left me miserable for days or even weeks. Now it happens more often that I sometimes react openly to it by being a bit off or being a bit colder just to regret it a few minutes later because it just turned out to be in my head. This is really getting in the way of making friends, or finding some at least, but I can't shut my emotions off in that moment. I'm 22 and shouldn't be such a child anymore. Does anyone on here know how to get rid of this? So this is something that a lot of people struggle with.
Okay, we're gonna hear him out a little bit. It does not really apply to my case. However, we did get rejected. So maybe it holds some merit for us. But we might also skip it. Just saying.
That we have a difficult time handling rejection, right? And what we're looking for is a way to get rid of it. So this is where, like, a lot of people will say, like, oh, just like handling rejection is about developing thick skin, right? So even we'll say that. We'll say, like, okay, it's about practice, it's about experience. You got to get rejected over and over and over again, survive it, and then you'll realize that, like, it's not that bad, right? And that's how you get over handling rejection.
That's exactly how it is. I got rejected so many times. Man, I remember back then when I was like a little, like 15, 16, chasing girls, getting rejected by everyone. And the ones that wanted me, I'd rejected them. It was just who rejects who first. Who just joined my channel? Who is this? You might have to wait a few minutes before you can talk in the chat. Okay, anyways. What was I saying? Yeah, just like who rejects who, right? And it worked. I got rejected so many times I didn't give an F afterwards. Right? It's just like you don't care. And then there's people you care about them so much. When they reject you, that's a different beast. But let's listen in. Let's see.
You just have to be rejected, which there's truth to. But if you really think about it, like, it's terrifying, right? So if you tell someone, yeah, like, the way to get over your phobia of snakes is to spend more time with snakes. Like, that's the reason that we have exposure therapy in psychiatry. We're like, oh yeah, like, let's expose you to it. The only way to learn how to handle getting rejected is to get rejected. Which is maybe true, right? But, like, it's actually terrifying if you really think about it. It's, like, really, really terrifying. Because these people don't want to do that. It's like if you have someone who's afraid of snakes and you're like, the solution to get over your fears, we're going to drop you in a pit of snakes. Like, they're not going to want to do that. If you have trouble with rejection and you're sensitive to rejection, you have trouble handling it, you're not going to sign up for it, right? In fact, that's not like a personal failing, which, by the way, a lot of people feel like they have, right? There's a lot of self-judgment here. So you're almost like rejecting yourself in this process. Oh, I'm such an idiot for being so sensitive to rejection. I should have grown up by now. Which, in that moment, what are you doing to yourself? You're rejecting yourself. You're not accepting yourself. You're not cutting yourself any slack. And so this is sort of where it honestly starts, right? So why are we so sensitive to rejection? Generally speaking, as human beings, the things that we're sensitive to are the things that we ourselves are insecure about, or the things that we do to ourselves. If I am afraid I'm ugly, if I'm afraid that I'm overweight, what am I going to be sensitive to? Comments that other people make about me potentially being ugly or being overweight. And sometimes what will even happen is they're not even making comments about my weight. right? Like, but the way that my mind is so primed, it's going to assume that a neutral comment is going to be interpreted as a comment about what I'm sensitive to. So rejection sensitivity is really common, and people are always trying to get rid of it. And the standard answer is, you know, get rejected over and over and over again. And that's, by standard answer, we're not saying it's wrong. There's a certain truth to it, right? Because once you get rejected a couple times and you survive, then you'll realize like, oh, it's actually like not that bad, or it won't devastate me the way that I thought it would. But that's not easy to engage in, and it's not sometimes helpful, right? So it's not like go out there and get rejected 1,000 times, then you'll overcome your rejection sensitivity. Whereas if we think about it, each of those rejections is associated with a lot of pain, right? It hurts. Like you can't just ask someone to go outside and go swimming in lava every day for like a week. Like they're not going to do that, right? It's really hard. So how can we understand this a little bit better, and how can we sort of potentially get some control over it? Okay, so let's talk about this, okay? So how do we overcome rejection sensitivity? Okay, so the first thing to understand is that oftentimes the rejection sensitivity, the sensitivity itself, comes from self-perception, right? And we kind of saw that over here. We look at this like, you know, I shouldn't be such a child anymore, right? So like we'll see that oftentimes. So the first thing that you can do is on a core level, like try to understand, where did you get the idea that you were worthy of rejection? Because if you're sensitive to something, chances are it's a fear that you hold internally. Right? Like, so what I would kind of ask yourself is, why are you rejectable? And as long as you have the belief that you are rejectable, it's going to be easy to be rejection sensitive, right? So this is actually like the foundation of it. So this is where if you do something like see a therapist or like work on your samskars or things like that, so a lot of like spiritual practices and stuff, you'll discover this kind of thing, right? As we like meditate and do this kind of stuff. You can do it sort of clinically or non-clinically. If you've got a, you know, serious problem and you have social anxiety or like real problems with your relationships, I'd recommend a clinician. But you can do this kind of internal work without necessarily going to therapy, okay? So that's the first thing, is like understand the core of your sensitivity. And if you can work on that core of sensitivity by exploring, when did your brain learn that you were rejectable? And then as you think about those experiences, as you really process and you realize that chances are the reason you're rejection sensitive today is because there was someone who rejected you super hardcore and hurt so much, and you carry that hurt around with you. And you're so afraid of that happening again that, like, you know, it's kind of projecting into your current life, okay? Second thing is that when people are rejection sensitive, what they want to do is get rid of it, right? We want this thing to just go away. And so this, in a sense, is one way of getting rid of it. But like the goal here is to, how can I say this? The goal here is to change our reaction or change our mind. Whereas what we're going to share with you today is a couple of things that you can do that may actually help with this, okay? A couple of other things that you can do. The next thing to think a little bit about is when we sort of talk about other ways to get rid of it, there's sort of the thick skin approach, right? Which is, if you get rejected enough, you'll get thick skin, and then it won't hurt as much, hurt less, right? But this is the kind of thing that's like absolutely terrifying, because I want y'all to understand this. So if you have a person who's rejection sensitive and you tell them to like get rejected and this hurts, like this is the whole point that you're trying to avoid. This is why you want to get rid of it, right? You're trying to avoid this at all costs. You want to be cured of the rejection sensitivity. So everything that your mind is doing in terms of even this kind of stuff. So when we get rejected, we feel hurt. So what do we do if we get rejected, right? So sometimes we internalize it. For weeks, I feel hurt on the inside, but I'm not going to say anything to anyone for weeks. So like when we get rejected, we just take that feeling, we stuff it down in there, we live with it. It ruins our life for days or weeks. And you're telling this person to go out there and get rejected? They're going to get rejected once. They're going to go for days or weeks feeling bad about themselves. And then you're going to be like, good job. Now go out there and do it again. Or what happens is that, and then what happens, they get fed up with dealing with it internally. And then what do they start doing? They start lashing out. They get cold, right? This is what this person said. Now it happens more often that I sometimes react openly by being a bit off or being a bit colder. So what's going on there? It's like, here's our bucket of bad feelings. And so why are we, and it's filling up with the toxicity of I got rejected, rejected, and then at some point it starts overflowing. And so now sometimes we'll lash out, but what's more common is we'll start acting cold, right? And why do we do that? It's because like it's kind of passive aggressive, because we can't actually lash out. Like we can't like overtly get mad at them, but we're gonna punish them for hurting us. So I'm gonna give this person the cold shoulder. And then what happens then is like this screws up our relationships. Because on the one hand, like here's this person that could be my friend that makes me feel hurt for weeks. And then I give them the cold shoulder and I don't really understand like what is going, like they don't understand what's going on. I feel hurt by them. And so now like they're asking me, hey, do you want to go grab dinner sometime? And you're like, I don't know, maybe. And then the friend is confused because they don't understand what's going on. And there's all this rich internal stuff that's going on within me when I get rejected, which they have no idea about. And so then it gets confusing for them. They stop texting me. They get frustrated. That feels like another rejection. And then like this whole cycle repeats again. Right? So what can you do here? So I do think that there's value in all of these things, but there are two other things that I'm going to show y'all that are kind of like really important. One is perception, and the second is communication. So the key thing here that a lot of people miss out on rejection sensitivity is how their perception is screwing them. So let's look at this, and we can see it right here. The most small sign of rejection makes me feel absolutely miserable. This is the key thing. So a lot of times when we talk about growing internally or growing psychologically, we're always trying to control our reactions, or we're trying to control our internal environment, or we're trying to control our actions, right? So if we think about like if someone has a problem, okay, there's signal, reaction, and action. And if you look at what people are asking for and where solutions are, right, it'll always be here and here. And we're missing a third of it. So let me give you all an example. So how do I get rid of this feeling? How do I overcome my social anxiety? How do I stop thinking about this? How do I not get hung up on that, right? How do I let go of an ex? How do I get over this relationship? How do I stop thinking about her all the time? Thinking about him all the time? How do I stand up for myself? How do I set boundaries? Right? How do I speak up for myself? How do I talk to my parents? So everyone's talking about the reaction and the action. How do I stop feeling this way? I want a magic bullet or magic wand that takes away the reaction. I want to shape my behavior.